Tēnā tātou e te whare. O te mea tūtahi e mihi atu ki tō tātou kaiha. Inoi tātou. E tō mātou matitirangi kia whakatapote mua tuku mai tō rangatitara. Kia whakaritia tō hihi e te whenua, i te rangi. Ko mai kia mātou ai nei tō mātou taro o ngā rā katoa. Kia wariwari koe o mātou hara me mātou huki wariwari anei te haro te hungi kino kia mātou. Aua i tuku mātou ki te whakawainga o ki te whakaorengia mātou te kino ake. Amen. Nei rā te reo kāranga i ko kiri nei i te kāhui whatu. Ko wai hangatia he korowai he taupo i te kāhui ako. Kia tū maia, kia tū pākari. Kia tū rangatira hati hei mai riora. Tēnā tātou. O te mea tuarua e mihi atu ki a koe e Anton. Nau mai ara mai whakatau. Whakatau mai ke raro o te maru o tēnei whenua. Nei te maunga karaputi. Mai te upoko o te ika ko taranaki whānui i whakatō. Nau mai, ara mai. Whakatau mai. Koutou katoa ngā mihi kia koutou mo tēnei rā, ke roto i te kaupapa nei, ko te unconscious bias pera. E mihi atu kia koutou mo tēnei kaupapa, kia koutou, ka nui te mihi, a tēnā koutou, huri noa tēnā tātou katoa. Tō tātou waka, ko te rangi mahi e, te hoi o runga, ko te puna, o te aroha e, ko te aroha te mea nui, o ngā mea katoa. Aira te ki o ngā tūpuna e. Kia ora tātou.
Welcome everybody. Welcome to our other DHBs joining us from around the region. And this is a really, it's fantastic that we've been able to have this in our District Health Board. We have a short amount of time, so I'm going to ask Anton and introduce Anton, who will be speaking on unconscious bias.
Tēnā tātou katoa, thank you for the welcome. Ko heka rangi te maunga, ko waiapu te awa, ko Ngāti Porou te iwi, ko Anton Blank aho. So I hail from the east coast of the North Island, from a very small village at the mouth of the Waiapu River called Rangitukia. And my father is a Swiss migrant who came to New Zealand in 1951. In terms of the presentation and my background, I've spent a long time working in issues to do with Māori development through a career in social work, communications, public health and literature. I've been involved in the racism and treaty kind of dialogue and debate for a long time. And I really got to the point where I felt that we needed another way to explore these issues, because despite all the changes that we've made in terms of health outcomes that now come for Māori, almost nothing has changed since the 1970s, and in some areas we've actually gone backwards. So that's just a bit of background in terms of who I am and what my perspective is. And along with my friend Dr. Kala Haukume from Auckland University, we've been researching and exploring the issue of unconscious bias for about 5 years, very specifically looking at the impact on Māori. So, but I come accompanied by colleagues from the Health Quality and Safety Commission, so I'll get them to introduce themselves as well.
Kia ora tātou, ko Lizzie Price aho. I'm from the communications team at the Health Quality and Safety Commission. I hail from born and bred Lower Hutt, actually, in fact, in this hospital, and as were my two daughters. So I feel very much at home, so thank you for the welcome and thank you for having us. And I'd just like to introduce Claire O'Leary from the comms team.
Called Claire O'Leary, aho. Thanks for having us here today. I was born in Orake, up in Wiki Haumaru Tūroro, Auckland, and I've been living in Wellington for over 20 years. I live at Auditorium, which some of you may know is Break Bay, on the south coast, and I'm just here as moral support, and I think it's great to see such a crowd, and it's happening all over the country, so we are part of a movement. Kia ora. Te aroha, te whakapono, me te rangi mai e, tato tato e.
I was just going to just continue very briefly and then hand over to Anton, just to talk a wee bit about the development of the Understanding Bias and Healthcare modules, and actually the engagement that we've had since we launched them on Monday. So they were officially actually available on the website since Sunday, and we've had an overwhelming response. Yesterday, no, Monday, we had the largest amount of hits on the patient safety website that we've ever had. And we've had all sorts of engagement through social media, particularly actually with Kyle Eggleton, who you'll see shortly on the video, who is a GP from Northland, who's very bravely stood up and said actually he didn't think that he was treating his patients differently, but when he audited himself, he found that he was under-prescribing to Māori, and that he hadn't thought he was racist, but that was a real moment of a big pause and big change for him. So just like to acknowledge Kyle and the many other people that we have on the 3 videos, because they're really about telling their stories. So they're less perhaps theory about implicit bias. There is theory, because it has to be, because they're learning modules, but there are also a lot of I think quite powerful personal stories from clinicians and also and particularly from consumers. So there are 3 videos. They're available on the Commission's website. They're also available through Learn Online, which is the Ministry of Health's learning platform, because you know, some people need certificates to get professional development points, etc. And just some thank yous again to the people featured on the video for their openness and their bravery and their transparency. To Anton, who did all the interviewing for the videos and also fronts them and is also an expert on bias, so we couldn't have done it without him. To the Health Quality and Safety Commission's Tūroro Māori, who gave us lots of feedback, and we made a lot of changes as a result to our ideas group and our responsible groups and our steering group, which was made up of PHO, DHB, primary, secondary, lots of representatives throughout the health sector. And also to the comms team at the Commission, which includes Claire, who have just been fantastic and really driven this. So thank you so much, and Anton, thank you.
So we'll start off by watching a compilation of excerpts from the 3 videos, which is about 7 minutes long. In terms of the online learning modules, all up it's about 35 minutes of watching, but we'll show you an edited version and then I'll facilitate some discussion afterwards. So,
no mai, haere mai ra, haere mai ki te kaupapa o te ao nei e, haere
Tēnā koutou. Welcome to these modules, which are an introduction to understanding bias in healthcare. Having biases related to particular groups or individuals can impact on their health. These modules encourage health professionals to examine their biases and how they affect the healthcare they provide and their interactions with consumers. We can show implicit or explicit biases. We might show bias because of ethnicity, age, gender, appearance, sexual orientation, disability, socioeconomic status, religious beliefs, or for many other reasons. Becoming conscious of these attitudes and biases is the first step towards change.
I had started reading some literature around how Māori were not treated the same as Pākehā. And I thought that surely wouldn't happen to me because I'm not a racist. So my treatment of people was going to be the same. So what I did was try to prove that by auditing myself.
So our brain has evolved to instantaneously associate people with stereotypes, and that needs to happen because of the huge amount of information that we're bombarded with. We suffer from cognitive overload, and what that means is we have to apply stereotypes in order to make sense of the social world. Unfortunately, however, we tend to just do that without really being conscious of it, and the implication is that we can act in a discriminatory way without really meaning to do that.
Tēnā koutou. This module is a second of 3 on bias. It narrows the bias focus to ethnic bias and particularly bias against Māori. It is a short overview on these issues. It touches on the role of Te Tiriti o Waitangi, as well as colonisation and racism and their impact on Māori health.
Kia ora, my name is Anthony Stevens, and this is Tonia, my eldest son. He has Down syndrome. It's often the assumption made that we're the poor, being Māori, socially deprived. There's an undercurrent of racism there. In an ideal world, I'd just like to be treated in an open, honest way, treated fairly, regardless of my colour, race or creed.
The inequity data is there for everyone to see, and it affects Māori throughout their whole life course, from before they're born to when we die, younger than our non-Māori counterparts.
There's certainly a difference in the way that Māori and Pākehā patients are treated at general practice and at hospital level. I think it needs to be said that it's not likely that doctors know that they're doing this, and it's not that they do it on purpose. But very clearly in general practice, we spend less time with Māori patients. We make a diagnosis less frequently. We give fewer prescriptions. We give fewer referrals to hospital. And when we go to hospital, we have fewer interventions. We have worse death rates for Māori patients. And Māori patients tend to spend longer in hospital.
The whole system was set up to disadvantage Māori and advantage non-Māori, particularly Pākehā people. It meant our whole health system, particularly hospitals, have been taken from models set up in the UK, where the rooms are very small and all about the individual, not about whānau or that collective responsibility. And then more explicitly within the hospital and within our primary care system too, we're seeing unequal treatment for Māori, so that they're missing out on evidence-based gold standard treatments, and as a result of becoming really unwell and for some people dying as a result. I think there are a number of simple things that we can do as clinicians to improve the way that we are engaging with Māori in meaningful ways so that we're improving their well-being, reflecting on our bias. So the implicit bias tests are easily available to all people now. You can do them online. It's worthwhile doing that and just actually seeing for yourself whether or not there is some bias in the way that you engage with people.
Tēnā koutou. Welcome to the third module in this series on understanding bias in healthcare. This module looks at consumers and clinicians' real-life experiences of bias, both implicit and explicit.
Some of the things that Pākehā doctors could do is as basic as giving a little bit more time, ensuring that the person before them is not just any person, that they must show some compassion when dealing with people, particularly of Pasifika cultures. The Pacific people, when we engage, your initial contact is very important. It's how we would, if you come out and meet and greet the patient and you're smiling and you look that you're wanting to engage, so immediately we respond. We know that you care.
The simple things that I could recommend for our clinicians: make an effort to learn the Pacific vowels, make an effort to pronounce the names well, and this really helps. It lifts a person knowing that someone's made an effort to get to know their name or even pronounce the name. And I think one of the other tips that I'd also suggest is to ask questions to the Pacific patient and gain clarity of what's important to them, what's their values.
No.
Right. So I think we'll start off by kind of setting the scene and looking at the situation now. And I think the process with unconscious bias is that first of all we need to become aware of our biases that often sit just below the level of consciousness. And once we've recognized those biases and where they're sitting, we can then become able to manage them. And I don't think it's a single moment. I think that you'll have one sort of major point of awareness, which I would suggest will probably happen in this session or when you watch the videos. And then once you've had that initial recognition, it's an ongoing process. So as you're involved in different situations, you'll become aware of your own biased behaviours, which then gives you an opportunity to change them. And I think I would really encourage you all to lean into that process. And I believe that once you've seen your own bias, you can't unsee it. Really what we're looking for with you today and over the course of these learning modules is we want you to have that kind of profound moment of realization and recognition of what's inside you. And you don't need to feel bad about it because it sits inside all of us. And you know, my own journey, bias journey, is happening every day. But in terms of focusing on bias and its impact in Māori, so here's what we know at the moment, that Māori men are less likely to receive medical intervention for heart disease. And we know that Māori women are less likely to be offered pain relief during childbirth. When we go to the doctor, we're 20 times less likely to be offered antidepressants than other groups of New Zealanders. This is despite the fact that we're more likely to be diagnosed with a mental health condition. So possibly overdiagnosed at the same time as we're being underprescribed. We're 3 to 5 times more likely to be arrested. Justice is a really interesting area that I've worked in. Basically, the further you go into the system, the more we see the bias playing out with Māori. So 3 to 5 times more likely to be arrested. That continues on. We're then 3 to 5 times more likely to appear in court. Once we're in court, we're 7 to 9 times more likely to be imprisoned than other groups of New Zealanders. So as the intervention ratchets up, so does the bias. And sole Māori parentage results in more bias and discrimination. So I think what we now know is that Māori are not an homogenous group. There's a diversity of experience. about 60% of us say that we have, we sit on a continuum of having no engagement with Māori, with tikanga Māori and te reo, through to what we call high to moderate engagement. 60% of us sit on that end of the continuum. Around 40% of us say that we have high engagement with te reo and tikanga Māori. So a real diversity of Māori experience. And what we know across that continuum is that Māori who have two Māori parents who look more obviously Māori experience more discrimination. So me, for example, I feel that I sail through life not really impacted by bias and racism in my day-to-day life. I don't get stopped in my car. I don't get followed around in shops. You know, so why do you think that might be? Colour of my skin, yes. Colorism is another way of understanding it. People who have darker skin tend to have a harder life. And actually, the more time I spend in the New Zealand data, there is something in us that makes us more positively inclined towards Pākehā people. Every workforce I've looked at, that is what I see. So teachers treat Pākehā children more positively, more kindly, give them more encouragement. They have lowest expectations of Māori and Pacifica students. And what do you think we see in achievement levels? We see Māori and Pacifica lagging well behind. And this is what we call the Pygmalion effect. So students live into the expectations of their teachers. And we see similar stuff happening in justice and in health and in social services. So, you know, 73% of young offenders in child, youth and family institutions are Māori kids, you know, like, and we're 15% of the population. So we see these patterns everywhere. Right, microaggressions. So, as David T. Leach said, we don't believe that this behaviour is deliberate. I certainly believe that if you're working in health, social services, justice, that you want to do a good job. So I would argue that most of this behaviour is unconscious, and I think the evidence supports my position. So basically, New Zealanders know not to say things. Overall, we know not to say racist things. So how we articulate our bias is through microaggressions. So a brief and commonplace daily verbal, behavioural or environmental indignity, whether intentional or unintentional, that communicates hostile, derogatory or negative slights and insults towards an outgroup. So a microaggression could be a teacher ignoring Māori students in the classroom. I would call that microaggressive behaviour. It's not conscious. The problem is that the students perceive it as deliberate behaviour. And this is the conundrum. We're not aware of our bias, but the subject perceives it as deliberate behaviour. So when we talk to teachers about their engagement with Māori students, what are some of the things that they might say? What do you think they'd say when we ask about treatment of Māori students?
There's no difference.
There's no difference. I don't see culture, I just see the child. I treat all children the same. When we're working with a cohort of schools at the moment, we got them to draw a map of their classrooms, and what are some of the things that you think we found about who sits where? Okay, so Māori cluster together, and they tend to sit at the back and the side of the mat. Now, why is that dangerous? They don't get the same level of interaction because the teachers Just through that simple exercise, we've kind of really stimulated the teachers to think about other strategies. So now they make sure that they break the groups of Māori kids up, and that they have clusters of sort of a range of achievements in different groups. So microaggressions are largely not conscious. What might be a microaggression in the health setting?
All the signs are directed to Pākehā.
All the signs are in English. Not giving Māori, not prioritising Māori in appointment schedules. When we talk to doctors about Māori patients, they say similar things to the teachers. I treat everybody the same. When we dig a bit deeper, what they tell us is that Māori are firstly sickly and non-compliant. So why would it be a bad thing to think that a patient is non-compliant?
Because you might not prescribe them medication that they need.
You won't prescribe them medication, or you won't offer them the full range of options. And this is what Martina Harwood was talking about, that Māori are missing out on gold standard healthcare. So it's a behaviour that sits just below the level of consciousness, but the outcomes for Māori are very serious. So basically, what we need to become aware of is our microaggressions. One of the, my favourite example of one of my own biases was that I realised that when I was on a call centre, when I heard a foreign accent, I was getting impatient. Now, what do we know about call centres? They're all outside New Zealand, a lot in Asia. And the one I was dealing with was in the Philippines. So it was like, oh, okay, aware of that, that's uncomfortable. I'm realising that. For me to continue on with my impatience, then I'm crossing the line. And the behaviour then becomes racism because it's a conscious thing. So this is how your own awareness will bubble up. And the trick is not to feel guilty about the microaggression, is to note it. I thank the universe for the awareness, and then I try new behaviour. So things we can do as individuals to break down our bias is to contrast negative stereotypes. So one of the things that we're doing with the teachers, for example, because some of the teachers say things like, Māori teachers say this actually, we perpetuate some of the stereotypes ourselves. They say Māori kids are good at sport and music. And I'm like, well, why can't Māori kid be an astronaut or a brain surgeon? We surveyed some young people this year, Māori young people, 40% said that they didn't care about sport. So we're making assumptions about that group, which is contained in the stereotype. So when we're working with the teachers, the set of role models we give them is the Māori and Pacifica team working on the project, because all of us have come from a diversity of backgrounds, working class, middle class backgrounds, but we're all now working in middle class occupations. And this is what we want the teachers to have when they're looking at Māori kids, because as Māori we need to grow our middle class. So see people as individuals and not stereotype them according to their group. See things from the perspective of the person who is being stereotyped. And I'm reminded of this all the time. When I become impatient with a particular group, when I have unrealistic expectations, is that I need to understand why they believe what they believe. So with the Māori teachers talking about sport and music, what I recognise is that they are themselves a product of the system, which has lower expectations of Māori and Pacifica students. So that gives me more kind of compassion and empathy. Mixed with members of other ethnic groups and social groups, this is really important and a really easy way to increase your own tolerance and understanding of different groups. And certainly in the States, they've had lots of success doing really simple things like getting white Americans to play sports with African Americans. Expose yourself to alternative media. The New Zealand media do a really good job of stereotyping Māori and pumping out the bad news. I suggest you watch Māori television, look at the news there, and you will get a completely different perspective. And why is it a different perspective?
It's a Maori one.
It's a Māori one. It's a completely different point of view. And I think it's a sympathetic point of view. And treat people both as individuals and part of their wider family and whānau. And this comes out a lot in the stories, in the videos, is, you know, don't just talk to me, talk to my family. And even if a Māori patient is saying, don't talk to my family, talk to their family. Because they are part of a network of connections of support. Organisations, things that you can do, provide data about different approaches and outcomes for some groups. So Kyle did the test, looked at his prescribing rates. This is something you might want to do as a work team, as a district health board, as a hospital. Have a commitment to a racism-free environment, actively uphold Te Tiriti. I think we have a lot of these things in place. Support staff to learn te reo Māori and about cultural safety. We were talking in the car on the way here. Peter Sharples said a number of years ago, Pākehā need to learn the language or it will not survive. So I think as well as learning the language, it gives you another window into Māori culture, understanding Māori culture. As an organisation, advocate against racism and support individuals to recognise and mitigate their bias. So, our model, which we propose in the learning modules, and that's a book that Carla and I wrote about bias, the little book about bias, which you can buy off my website. So we propose that there are two types of brain. And if any of you know anything about brain science, we talk about system 1 and system 2 thinking. System 1 is fast and automatic. System 2 is more thoughtful and deliberate. So we've called system 1 bias brain. It produces microaggressions, physical, cognitive, and emotional. Now, we know that this is especially true for workers working in stressed situations. They're on automatic pilot. Teacher in the classroom, unconsciously, they're thinking, what's easiest to deal with here, with this chaos? I would hate to be a teacher. So they naturally, they've been observed in classrooms, they physically spend more time with Pākehā kids. So they're in bias brain at that point. It's triggered by bias, and it's impatient, judgmental, and critical. And our goal is always to emerge out of bias brain into mindful brain. Mindful brain is slower, more deliberate, and logical, and provides the pathway to change. And in terms of a mode, mindful brain is open, compassionate, and kind. Now, how we get out of bias brain into mindful brain is mindfulness and meditation. So, and here is a bias that, a meditation that you can use. It's very simple. Breathe out, bias brain. So exhale the impatience, and inhale mindful brain, the compassion and kindness. So this is designed for busy people in busy work situations because we know that that is when the bias is going to be driving decision making. And some of you might be thinking, oh, this is all about new age, you know, what nonsense. This is the intervention that we tested with the police and with the teachers, and it works. And in the School of Teachers we were working, only 3 out of the 13 aren't using the meditation. So to me, this is the most important bit, because this is about personal change. I think we've got a lot of the structural stuff in place, which we can keep tweaking, the treaty workshops, the Māori strategies, but this is the next level of change that we need to lean into, which is about personal change and transformation. Right, so do any of you have any questions?
I was interested in the teacher synopsis that you gave us. I have 2 mokopuna who are blonde-haired, blue-eyed, fluent in Te Reo. But because, and I'm listening to what you're saying, if they had all the cultural physiology of a Maori, they may be treated totally different. But because I think you're right, because they're blue-eyed and blonde hair, they haven't been pushed out to the sides. So it is quite interesting, isn't it, to take that and actually put it into your own life and view it.
Yes.
And, you know, I have, the team that I have are fantastic, absolutely amazing. Sometimes we get some frustrations and we have to go through consent forms, and you will hear people say, oh my God, they've put it in pencil again.
Yes.
And I said, well, maybe they don't have a pen, you know? Oh, don't they realise how much harder it is to keep that work going? You've got to keep that bias out of your head. You know, you've got to say, well, I wonder why, or how much longer is it going to take you to do this piece of work? But there's still that bias there.
Yes.
And then I don't know whether it's then when they meet the child, whether that bias, when they look at the form and it's still in pencil, you know, it's in pencil, do they, you know, interact in a biased way with that child? It'd be interesting. I don't know if we're going to stop it.
Yeah, I mean, I would say most definitely they will be, unless they check their bias. And everything you describe is, to me, classic bias brain. But also, as I talk to more health professionals, I think gatekeepers are really important. Receptionists, people who make appointments, that is where the gatekeeping starts. And that is where the bias starts. And as Māori move into the system, it compounds. The same as courts. So at every level, we need this intervention. Somebody asked me yesterday, what bias do Māori then bring to their appointments? The bias that Māori bring to their appointments is, what do you think it might be?
Expectation of being treated poorly.
They expect to be treated poorly. So they expect poor service. So it becomes a really complex, dysfunctional relationship. You've got the impatience and the intolerance on the part of the health professional, and you've got the Māori patient buying out probably before they even get there. Yeah, right, down the back.
Anton, there's been some discussion for a while now amongst some of the training teams around science, and there's a company called Diversity Works based in New Zealand, which some modules on unconscious bias. They argue that unconscious bias and implicit bias are subtly different. What I can understand, they're basically the same thing. I'm wondering whether it's a sales pitch. What's your view on the difference, if there is any, between unconscious and implicit bias?
I think that the correct terminology, scientific terminology, is implicit bias. I think that the more commonly used term is unconscious bias, and I think as terminology it's easier for people to understand. So I probably use the terms interchangeably. And in terms of the public discussion, the unconscious bias is the more popular term. I mean, the other issue that we get a lot is that this is conscious behaviour, that it's not bias, it's racism. I think that that point of view, there's not a whole lot of evidence to show that. And the problem is that people won't admit to being racist. So the discussion in and of itself kind of creates an impasse. Because you've got one side saying you're racist and you've got another side saying, no, I'm not.
I have another question. Sorry. The modules are very much aimed at bias around ethnicity in the HQSC, but the theory applies, you've said to gender and things like that. But we have a number of patients who are disabled, and does the same approach apply to all of those biases?
Yes. And I think that the solutions emerge out of a partnership with that diversity of groups. And all the groups will have the syndrome and the behaviour, the paradigm is the same, but the context and the experiences will be very different. And I think that they all need tailored solutions. Yes.
I'm just wondering about if you've come across like a confounding variable with bias against particularly Maori Pacific Islands, with bias against people in larger bodies and the assumptions that are made about their approach, like their lifestyle, which may or may not be true, where people are denied treatment until they change their body shape.
Yeah. Well, we know that overweight people are less likely to be interviewed for jobs. They're less likely to be appointed into roles. And how, what do you think managers making those appointments might say about why they didn't appoint?
I don't know. I mean, I just see it in healthcare all the time.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. I mean, I would assume in the healthcare setting that they're probably making very similar assumptions to Māori, that they're sickly and non-compliant, or else they wouldn't be in that condition. Any other questions?
Just so if you're talking to a patient who said even if the patient says don't include the family, include the family, I find that, would you negotiate with the patient saying, I think it would be a really good idea if we discuss this with your family? I think things about confidentiality and stuff would really come in, and I feel really awkward talking to someone. Well, I don't think I would if they said don't include my family. I don't think as a nurse I could include the family.
I knew I dropped a clanger when I said that. Okay, somebody's going to pick me up on this. So, when I was a social worker, for example, there's no way that I would have worked with Māori kids without talking to the extended family, and I had legislation behind me. Obviously, you know, you've got rules and regulations that guide your work, but overwhelmingly, when we talk to Māori, this comes through as a really strong theme, that it's not just me, I'm part of this network. So I think that somehow you need to find a way to work with that. Yeah.
And it becomes evident. I was working in a university setting, and I was interviewing mothers and children, and a young mother arrived and the grandparents came as well, and I invited them all in and went to get extra chairs, and they were like, their body language, from their body language, it was clear that they didn't anticipate that they would be invited in. And when they were welcomed, and they were pleased to be welcomed, but it was very clear that that was not what they had expected would happen. And these are people who all live in the same household, and the research was about the child, and the grandparents were very involved in that child's care, and it was very appropriate that they all be involved in the conversation.
But probably for a lot of Māori, and it starts in schools, they're used to being excluded. So that becomes the template and sets your expectations. So I think it's kind of having compassion and understanding about the Māori context. Any other questions or comments? Another one?
I'm a rheumatologist. I've got a great interest in gout and how we do things for that. And there's quite a strong evidence on how we behave and prescribe for different groups of people. Is it possible, I'm aware there are GPs who have a strong interest in being equitable, and still when they audit themselves, they can't find themselves behaving in an equitable manner. Can we completely overcome implicit or unconscious bias, or is that an unreasonable expectation? We have to do our very best, but can't be 100%. Is there evidence that you can get over that by awareness?
Well, there is evidence that sustained commitment to mindfulness creates new neural pathways in our brain. So I do believe it's something you can chip away at. And certainly in terms of my own development, I've felt some very significant changes, but it's still, sometimes I can still slip back into old habits. So I think it just requires constant vigilance. And what I like about data is it tells the story. So I think keeping an eye on data, observing your own behaviour, and engagement with clients, all those things will help you over time to change. Yeah, and that's right. Okay, and we're looking at 2 generations of change. So we know that for significant social change, that's the kind of time frame we need. And certainly the issues that I normally talk about are rainbow rights, homosexual law reform. So that's like taking a couple of generations, and smoking as well. Reduction in smoking rates has taken about 2 generations for a significant change. So we need to be in for the long haul. And I guess what we're giving you here is tools for you to manage your own little universe. As a collective, we can kind of work on the system, but all of us need to make a commitment at that very kind of micro interpersonal level. All right, I don't think there's any more questions, so thank you very much.